Chapter 9, Ancient Rome. Section 2, Rome becomes an empire. As Rome expanded, many wealthy Romans neglected their civic duties. Really, they only thought about gaining more and more power and more wealth. So this kind of increased the distance between the rich and the poor in Roman society. So common people oftentimes had that feeling of resentment toward the power and privileges of the wealthy. They didn't like the wealthy. I hate those rich people! Now there will be people who are trying to change those things. Reformers will try to solve some of these problems. But oftentimes, when the reformers came up with a plan, the Senate opposed those reforms. They shot them down. Also, a lot of times, those that opposed those reforms had the reformers killed. Among those who were ambitious for power and wealth were generals. They had conquered lots of land for the Roman Empire and were looking for more power. Now, we've talked about this before, especially with the Greeks and tyrants, and how the tyrants really appealed to the poor people. And Roman generals really appealed to the poor farmers and got the poor farmers to shift their loyalties from the Republic to themselves. So it gave those generals more power, so as they got more power, then they could maybe take over the government. Now what we're going to see is a civil war breaking out. A civil war is an armed conflict between groups within the same country. So, on one side of the Civil War, we have a guy named Marius. And Marius was supported by the plebeians, or he supported the plebeians. And on the other side, we have the patricians, led by a guy named Sulla. Now, after the Civil War, it went on for quite a few years. Sulla and the patricians will win, and that was in 82 BC. And Sulla will become a dictator. This is Marius, and this is Sulla. Boo, Sulla. He's like the devil. Boo. After Sulla died, you'll have more generals fighting for power. And one of those generals was a guy named Julius Caesar. He was a general, he was a politician, he was a dictator. Caesar was born around 100 BC into a rich family. Much of his power actually happened on the battlefield, however, not because he was a rich person. He did conquer lots of land for Rome. He will conquer parts of Asia Minor. He will go to Spain and conquer it. He also, and this is what really made him into a really strong general, he went and conquered a place called Gaul, which is today called France. The Gauls were really fierce fighters. However, Caesar was able to defeat them pretty handily. Now, Caesar was a good politician and reformer, and it made him very popular with the plebeians. Not everyone liked Julius Caesar. One of his enemies was a guy named Cicero. Now, Cicero was a kind of a key Roman consul, and he was a great speaker, considered one of the greatest speakers in Roman history. He was born into a wealthy family, just like Caesar was. And again, he was a great speaker, and he was elected a consul in 63 BC, and was not a big fan of Caesar or his dictatorship when it happens later on. Now, Caesar was ordered by the Roman Senate to break up his army, because the Senate could see that he was getting really powerful. And they ordered Caesar to break up his Senate. But Caesar refused to break up his army. And he rode right into Rome to fight for control. So he already conquered much of the peninsula, the Italian peninsula, and then he rides into Rome. Caesar will become victorious in his attempts to take over Rome. And in 46 BC, he arrives with the support of the people, and he is named dictator for life. Now, this, of course, is unusual because, remember, dictators were temporary leaders, but Julius Caesar was named dictator for life. Okay, so Caesar, as this dictator for life, did lots of stuff to help out Rome. His reforms included expanding the Senate, making it bigger, enforcing laws against crime, and creating jobs for the poor. So he really had the support of the poor people. However, a lot of Romans did not like the fact that he was becoming more and more powerful and that he was acting more and more like a king. Now, there was a lot of concern over Julius Caesar's growing power, and the Senate will meet to discuss this power because they really resented the fact that he was so powerful. Among the senators was Julius Caesar's best friend, Brutus. And as much as he loved his friend, Julius Caesar, he realized that Caesar was becoming way too powerful. And so the senators plotted to get rid of Caesar. So they invited Julius Caesar to the Senate, and while they were in there, they all surrounded Julius Caesar and stabbed him in the back. Now, their first stab was from his best friend, Brutus. Brutus goes up to him, gives him a hug and a kiss, and then stabs him in the back. And as Caesar's writhing in pain, he goes, "Et tu, Brute," which means, "You too, Brutus." And then the other 38 senators came up and stabbed him in the back as well. And he died. Now, the leaders of the conspiracy, like Brutus and some others, ran off. And they will be hunted down and eventually killed, or they commit suicide because they knew they had no chance of winning. But with Julius Caesar's death marks the end of the Roman Republic as well. So the death of Caesar brought the death to the Republic. Now, a number of people are going to want to take over Caesar's power. One of the men was a guy named Octavian, who was the great-nephew and adopted son of Julius Caesar. And he's going to fight for control. And among other people will be one of Caesar's closest friends, whose name was Mark Antony. He was one of his top generals in his army. And they will fight. Many people try to kill Octavian so that he wouldn't take over, but he managed to survive. And Octavian hunted down all the ringleaders of Julius Caesar's death and killed them. Mark Antony ended up killing himself because he had an affair with the Egyptian queen named Cleopatra, as did Julius Caesar. And Cleopatra was captured and put, in a prison, or she was held prisoner, let's just put it that way. And Mark Antony, knowing that he was about to be captured by Octavian, decided to kill himself. And he threw himself on the blade of his sword. Now, I believe he also got information that Cleopatra had died. Cleopatra had put her hand in a basket with a poisonous asp, meaning snake, in it, and it killed her. But I think both of them got conflicting reports that both of them were dead, so they both killed themselves because they thought the other was dead. Anyway, after defeating Mark Antony, all is done, and Octavian is the new leader of Rome, and he is named Augustus, which means exalted one, and he is now known as Augustus Caesar. He becomes the first emperor of Rome. So this is the beginning. When Octavian becomes the emperor, that's the beginning of the Roman Empire. Augustus restored some aspects of Republican government, like having a Senate. So he didn't get rid of the Senate, even though he was in complete control over the government. He brought the provinces under control. They were kind of rebelling. He strengthened the empire's defenses by putting more regular army around the empire. And he began something called a civil service, which is a group of government officials that collected taxes, they ran the postal system, and managed the grain supply. Augustus also rebuilt and beautified much of Rome with temples, theaters, and monuments, and used marble, a key ingredient there in many of the structures. Now, the reign of Augustus will begin a long period of peace and prosperity in the empire called the Pax Romana. Now, if you were to translate Pax Romana, it means Roman peace, and it lasted for 200 years. Now, Augustus himself did not live 200 years, no, but this time period lasted for 200 years. So emperors that followed Augustus will continue this stability. The Roman army will become the greatest fighting force in the world, and lots of roads will be built, with all the roads leading to Rome. So you kind of see an example of the roads here. There's a common phrase, a very popular phrase, that all roads lead to Rome, and that's essentially what happened. Farming was the basis of the economy in Rome, but new industries started to pop up like pottery and glassmaking and metal goods. That was increasing. Trade routes also increased economic growth, and the economy was also united by a common currency called the denarius. That means everywhere in the Roman Empire used the same money. That helped the economy. Here's an example of what the denarius looks like. A lot of times the emperor's face will be on the coin, so for this case, Augustus Caesar's face right here on this coin. That is the end of section 2.